Welcome to The Hype Within, exploring journeys of authentic leadership and growth. On the show, tech leaders will share their stories of developing their leadership skills and challenges they faced along the way. You'll learn about their approaches to self-reflection and personal growth, and how they've been able to build a foundation of authenticity that has propelled them to success. I'm your host, Hannah Jacover, B2B marketing leader turned leadership and executive coach. Are you ready to get hyped up? Let's dive in. Hey leaders, today we're here with Brandon Redlinger, VP of Marketing at Crosschq. Hi Brandon, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good too. I'm so excited to chat with you about your leadership journey and all things related to that.
Yeah, I'm excited to not talk about ABM and marketing, which is usually what I do on podcasts. So it'll be a nice departure.
I know. It's funny because when I started this podcast and just based on my network, which is primarily marketing folks based on my background, everybody was so excited because I feel like these are such great leaders. There's so many great leaders who also happen to be amazing marketers. And we only talk about the marketing. We never talk about the leadership, which is, in my opinion, way more important.
100%. I do not disagree at all.
All right, well, let's get into it. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you would define your leadership style.
Yeah, good question. My leadership style, it's always been more like lead by example, but also kind of servant leadership. And it's always been that way too. Growing up, whenever I was captain of my hockey team throughout childhood and through college, I wasn't the best player, the fastest, the hardest shooter. It's always been more, he gets the work done, he knows what he's doing. And I'm not the loudest voice in the room either. It's always been more lead by example. So that's what I always try to do with my team and with my team too. Like, I never expect them to do something that I wouldn't do myself, that sort of thing. I always tell my team, I'm serving them. I'm here to serve you, right? So you put me to work and then I will do my best to remove blockers, et cetera. And then one other thing that really has influenced my leadership style, have you heard of intent-based leadership?
Oh, I haven't, no.
Yeah, it's okay. It is my favorite leadership book out there, Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet. And long story short, he was going to take over one of the best ships in the whole naval fleet. And then last minute, he got reassigned to the worst naval fleet or the worst ship. And within just a few years, he turned it around to be the best ship out there. And one of the big concepts, there's a lot of great concepts in there, but one of them is what he calls intent-based leadership. So when someone comes to you, rather than saying, hey, Brandon, can we do this thing? It's, hey, Brandon, I intend to do this thing. Here's the reasoning behind it. So all I have to do is say, great, looks good. And the first few times they might come to me and they might say, hey, Brandon, I intend to do this. Here's the reasoning. And then I might poke and I might prod and I might ask a bunch of questions. And then over time, they'll anticipate the questions that I'm going to ask. So they'll come to the table and say, all right, here's the information that you need to know. So that all you have to do is say, great, thumbs up.
I love that concept. First of all, it's a great communication framework to think about leading with intention and intent.
Yes.
And it reminds me a little bit about the pyramid principle. Have you heard of that one?
No, tell me about the pyramid principle.
It's sort of exactly how you described. I mean, it's more of a specific communication style rather than like a leadership style, but it's bringing the big thing first. Like, I'm going to do this. And then breaking it down with your arguments or justification in a way that sort of makes sense for the listener. So it becomes this like pyramid style, and it's a great way to communicate with your team. So it sort of reminds me of that, but then at that like larger leadership level.
Yeah, don't bury the lead. If we're talking marketing stuff, relating to marketing stuff.
Look at you. Okay, so you mentioned servant leadership. I hear this one a lot. And I'm curious, what is your definition of servant leadership?
Yeah, servant leadership, I probably think of it as a little bit different than the traditional sense of servant leadership. Honestly, I didn't even know the exact definition of servant leadership. But the way that I see it is, again, it's like all about, I'm here to serve you. And the philosophy is, I'm here to help you get your job done, whether that does mean, again, removing obstacles. And also for me, there is a big difference between like coaching and teaching. There's a time and a place for each, right? Mm-hmm. I tend to take a more coaching approach where I'm asking questions, I'm probing, I'm helping you come to the conclusion rather than saying, okay, here's the answer, here's what you need to go do. Of course, there's a time and a place for that. And depending on the skill and motivation, if you had the X and Y axis skill and motivation, and if you're high on motivation but low on skill, you might need a little bit more of the actual training and teaching. But as you move up on skill, then competencies, helping them get to that higher level, you might take a little bit more of the coaching approach. So that's kind of how I think about it too. But also, yeah, going back to servant leadership, it really is about like listening. It's about empathy. It's about, again, going back to coaching and really just kind of being that steward to help them get to where they need to be in their career. And then another part of it too that I think about a lot is like everyone is different. I'm not going to coach and manage everyone the exact same. Mm-hmm. And then also I have to think about the entire team. So it's not just coaching the individual. It's how do I get the entire team to work together and be most efficient and most effective?
Yeah. And then the organizational goals and alignment with that, it's sort of just that expansion. I love that you differentiate between coaching and teaching. And that is something where I think I've seen it on LinkedIn too, where leaders will talk about coaching their team, but in reality, they're just telling them what to do.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions around coaching and what coaching is. Being a coach, I always have to define what it is and what it isn't. But I do see that on the leadership side where people believe that they're coaching, but they're thinking of it like, I'm a sports coach, not like a professional coach, because a sports coach is going to tell you what to do.
Right.
And they're going to make the plays and show you. But a professional coach, in the way that you're speaking about, is a guide and is really allowing you to discover the answers and your own potential on your own.
Yeah, exactly. And what I really want to get to in coaching is helping my people be like competent, confident, and autonomous. And like, to me, I'm a good coach if I can get my people to being competent, confident, and autonomous.
I love that. What are some of your go-to coaching questions?
Oh, great question. Okay. There are some basic frameworks. Like there's always start with why. I'm a big fan of the start with why, just making sure people like understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they're doing it right now specifically. And then there's the ask the 5 whys, getting the real root of why they're doing what they're doing and making sure that they fully understand all the implications and they fully understand the motivation behind it. And then there are other things that I think about frequently, like, are you doing your best work, or what can I do to help you do your best work? A lot of this too, honestly, is like, it's building psychological safety with the team so that they are honest with you on on a lot of these things. So how I do with my one-on-ones, I have weekly one-on-ones, like more tactical, let's do check-ins and let's actually look at performance against our OKRs, that sort of thing. But then I have broader one-on-ones where we actually don't talk tactics at all. We're talking more like, are you happy at work? Are you doing your best work? Do you have what you need? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Also, I use it as a kind of a career check-in. Is this job really helping you get to where you want to be in your career? And just kind of coaching them through some of the questions. Because a lot of people show up to the job and they're just like, I just want to do my job. And they don't really map out how this job helps them get to where they ultimately want to be. So I'm always asking those sorts of questions. Where I was going with that, one of my questions that I love to ask them is, what skill do you have that you are not utilizing right now at work, or that is maybe being underutilized? And like one of my designers was like, I'm really into animation and, I do some animation stuff on the side. And I'm like, well, that's really good to know, because I've been thinking about how we could use more animations and videos. We don't do animations and videos right now. So it's like uncovering stuff like that. So now he's interested in this. He's more engaged at work and he can start to apply some of that, the muscle that he's trying to work into work right now. So that's one of my favorite questions.
It just opens up so many opportunities and win-wins for everybody when you just explore like that. And it's so powerful. One of my favorite coaching questions is, if you had all of the resources and support that you needed what would you do next?
I love that.
That one scares people.
Yeah, I bet.
Scary as in causing very deep processing and thinking. Yeah.
Self-reflection that people usually don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
The hard work, the good work.
Yes, the work. It's like the most important out there.
Exactly.
Okay, so you mentioned turn the ship around, intent-based leadership as being influential to your leadership journey. What else has been an influence in your journey?
I mean, I think honestly, the biggest thing for me is just being curious and just always wanting to be a better leader.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are a lot of people that I like to follow, like David Marquet, the author of Turn the Ship Around. Like he's a great follow on LinkedIn, and he's got another book out there. I forget what it's called now. Communicate. I'm actually looking at it on a bookshelf. I can't read it. It's Dark Text Against a Dark Background.
I could put it in the show notes.
Yeah, put it in the show notes. But it's about how the very specific words that you use matter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important. Like even changing one word makes a big difference. Like there's a difference between a seat, like a chair, and a throne. Same thing, 4 legs, you sit on it. It's the same function, but it's a vastly different picture of what you have in your mind. So the words matter a lot. I'm a big fan of Marcus Buckingham and First Break Out the Rules, his other book, 9 Lies About Work. And then like, I'm a Tony Robbins kind of guy too. You know, even though he's not necessarily leadership, but, you know, motivation and self-reflection, that sort of stuff.
Both of my parents are executive coaches, so I get to have fun stories. And my dad was really inspired by him, and he did a lot of NLP training. And
oh, I love NLP.
Yeah. It's really cool stuff. The psychological component behind influencing and coaching and bringing that into leadership. There are so many advantages. I mean, you mentioned like the words you use truly do matter because our brains are so powerful and we react. If our brains like pick up on certain threats and certain words that have those undertones, I mean, our whole physiological system changes. And it's pretty incredible bringing some of that into your work.
Yeah, exactly. Like one example is even things like some of our marketing goals. There's a difference between if you say, like, we want to increase our share of voice versus plan to dominate your competition. Just the word dominate, like you can't hunch over and be like, dominate. You say dominate, it changes your physiology in your body. Sure, it's the same thing, but just the way you say these things, the way you set goals for your team, those specific words make a huge difference.
Yeah. I feel like there was such an era around using war tactic language like that. And you see it all over, like conquer our goals and attack the competition. And I feel like now with this generational shift that we're moving through, that is so off-putting. It comes off as a threat to people now, whereas before it was like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, times are changing for sure.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting I personally am like, oh, like, why do we say those things? And I shy away from them. But it will be interesting to see as we go through this generational shift, just the adjustments in language and the themes that we use when we communicate.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay. I remember the name of the book now. It's Leadership is Language.
Oh, perfect.
David Marquet, Leadership is Language. Yeah.
Okay. I'm writing it down. Okay. I want to hear, because you have a really awesome career journey and your trajectory, you know, to where you are today in this VP of marketing seat. And you were previously director, senior director. I want to talk about that move because we have a lot of people that are going to be listening to this that are like, I'm a senior director, I'm a director, I want to be a VP of marketing, I want to be on the CMO track. And for you, what was that jump like? What was the lessons that you learned about yourself and the shifts that you had to make?
Yeah, good question. So I'll tell you first, I do think that is a hard jump to make. And I get questions around that all the time because people can't make that jump. I think why I was able to make that jump was because it has nothing to do with marketing and has everything to do with what we're talking about here. Is I'm actually a leader of people. I know how to manage people. I know how to motivate them. I know how to build a culture. And I mean, that is, I think, one of my underrated skills that is not going to show up on my LinkedIn or my resume, but usually shows up pretty strong when I'm just talking to other CEOs and leaders out there. But it's like, I think about how to build culture and how to motivate people all the time. And for me, like, it doesn't become about marketing at all. As the VP, it's about how do I manage and get the most out of my people? And again, it's individuals, but also an entire team working together. So the first thing that I did when I got to the Crosschq team is, okay, step back, assess everything. We looked at the current state of everything and then looked at our goals and where we want to be. And then I put a vision for Crosschq's marketing into place. And there's 3 parts to our vision. And then I put operating principles into place. So, okay, this vision, this grand vision that you have for 5-10 years for the marketing team, great. How do I get there? Okay, here are the 6 operating principles that should guide all your actions to help you get there. And we revisit that at the beginning of every quarter, but I keep that in my marketing slide so that whenever someone wants, they can revisit it. They don't have to say, oh, shoot, where'd that slide go? It's, hey, this week's marketing slides always have the vision and our operating principles right at the beginning. And then at the beginning of each quarter, I really do focus on one specific principle, just what is most relevant to us right now? What do we really need to focus on as a team? That's kind of how I've actually operationalized some of that leadership and really helped me like really become that VP instead of just kind of your entry-level manager or your mid-level manager.
That sparked a thought for me. I noticed with this shift, and even people sitting in that director role, the shift from that like bottoms up thinking and planning and motivation to that top down.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Even what you explained is like you have to start with that big why or vision or what is the problem, and then drill down. Those details come last. I'm putting my arms up, but it's really like that foundation that you're trying to get to. And even when you think about strategy and planning with marketing at that level, you are taking the entire organizational goals into consideration first. And then, okay, what's the chunk that we need to contribute to? And then breaking it down further and further, the specifics and the tactics and the channels, those come last. But I think sitting in those other seats, you're used to sort of thinking about that bottoms up. I'm going to do all these things and we're going to go on these channels and these tactics. But why? What's the big goal that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, exactly. It is being company first instead of, marketing team and marketing objectives first. Again, yeah, it does start with the company goals, which will define the company strategies, which should then inform your marketing goals, which should inform your marketing strategies. And then you can put together your campaigns, and then your campaigns cascade down to the channels. And yeah, so it's exactly what you're saying. It just cascades down from the top.
Yeah. With this shift, with this move, that you say is kind of challenging to make, but you've got these leadership skills that I think I agree, like the leadership skills, the people skills, they are always underrated when somebody's just really stellar at that, and they should be highlighted. I'm wondering though, thinking about that like upward leadership. So now that you're in this VP seat, what is it like to communicate within the C-suite and at that board level? What do you need in order to be successful at that?
Great question. So yeah, I'll go back to what I just mentioned, it being like company first. And it does take a little bit more of that courage and that conviction to be able to voice your opinion in either whether it's a board meeting or just your weekly executive meeting. But you do need that courage and that confidence. That was feedback that was given to me in my first leadership role was, Brandon, you're really smart, but you're not talking up here at all. And it did take me a while to just build up the courage and the confidence in myself to insert myself into these conversations. I'm also not the type that likes to interrupt. So like I'll probably wait too long to, kind of try to jump in. And it's something that I've had to work on is when do I insert myself at the right time? How do I insert myself at the right time? And it's really hard in these executive meetings sometimes because you have a lot of strong characters and strong personalities. So that is one thing that I've personally had to work on, but I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have other people who gave me that feedback and cared about me, and that I was open to hearing that feedback too at the same time. So that's another key piece of leadership to me, is just like the self-awareness, self-reflection, and always just working on yourself. So that to me is a big part of it for sure. And then I think the other piece that's kind of helped me is understanding the other parts of the business. So, I mean, I actually started out in sales. I was an SDR, and then I was an AE for a bit. Then I was more in the growth side before I moved to straight up marketing. But I've always had such an interest in like the HR and people side. I've always been a part of the culture committee and that sort of stuff. So I understand a lot of other pieces of the business, which helps me be a more effective executive at the leadership level.
You outlined the way that I like to think of leadership, and it's really developing yourself as a leader and then developing the leadership skills, which may include really learning the business and how do I communicate across these lines of business. I want to stick with the developing yourself as a leader. And you talked about courage and confidence, and people are like, be confident. It's hard to just be confident.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah. And it does require a lot of personal growth and going inward. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you did on your personal growth journey to have more confidence and have more courage?
Yeah, I think a big part of it for me is surrounding myself with the right people. I'm very much a believer in that adage, the say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I really do think make sure you're spending time with the right people. And these days, that means digitally more than anything else. Like, who are the people that you follow on Twitter and LinkedIn? Who are the people that you're engaging with most? Who are the people that you have meetings with the most or text the most? It's not necessarily the people who show up to your house and you hang out with, although that's a big piece of it. But more and more these days, it's who's influencing you online.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a better way to think about it. And then seeking out feedback has always been a big thing for me. Like, a lot of people don't like to give feedback because they think it might hurt them, right? There's a book I'm sure you're familiar with, Radical Candor. It's one of those things that is hard for people to do because they think you can either care deeply about someone or you can challenge them directly. Whereas, I mean, the book goes into it very well. How do you do both at the same time? So I am a big believer in that, but also it's about seeking out that feedback and making sure other people are comfortable with giving you that open and honest feedback. And then, of course, you do have to be open to it. You have to hear it. You have to really reflect. And if you reflect and you think they're wrong, great. If you reflect, you think they're right, and it is something for you to improve upon, also great, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I am very fortunate to have like people like John Miller. Worked for John Miller for 4.5 years, probably the biggest influence on just both my like marketing career, but also like my leadership career, because he was always pretty direct and honest with me. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. You're right. You know, the first time I became a director was under him. And he was like, Brandon, you're probably the best executor I know, but you got to start learning to get work done through other people now. I was like, oh, I never even thought of that. Oh, okay. So it's getting that feedback from other people, because that was a complete blind spot for me, you know?
Yeah, feedback, it's not always a gift, but I would say if you can usually make it a gift, you can see the upside in it, and your learning edges are so important to identify, because how do you know what to work on if you don't even know? People have to help you see those things and help you identify those blind spots. It's so powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're going to do a little fun thing called Lead or Leave. And I'm going to give you a couple different scenarios. I'll read them, and then you just have to quickly answer if you would lead in that situation or leave. At the end, I'll give you some time to justify any that you want, because people are always like, wait, but I want to say more.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Lead or leave, a crucial decision comes down to prioritizing short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and environmental impact.
Definitely lead. Definitely lead on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Implementing a 4-day work week, like I think Microsoft Japan had started this first, but now we see a lot of other companies doing it. Lead or leave?
Oh, I gotta leave that one. I've got too many conflicting ideas on if that's good or not.
I want to hear this after we're done. I want to hear some of that. Okay, here's another one. Adopting a pay transparency policy where employees have access to information about their colleagues' salaries all the way up to the top.
Ooh, okay, this is a good one. In theory, I think that's great. In practice, I think so many companies are so messed up that if they tried to do this, it would cause way more harm than good. I don't think I've been at a company or even seen a company that does that well. I mean, there's examples of companies who like used to do it early on and then they're like, nah, this is too hard. And then they stop doing it. I leave. I'm not touching that one. Good in theory, but I don't see it working.
It's a tough one. Okay, last one. Implementing a no meetings policy where employees communicate primarily through digital channels only.
Ooh. I think there's so much value in like real meetings, but there's so many meetings that shouldn't be meetings. You know what I mean? Oh man, I'm gonna leave that one too.
Let's do one more. This one's my favorite one. Elon Musk has decided to buy your company and you just found out.
Oh, I'm leading for sure. No doubt.
Before he destroys it.
Yeah. No, even if he does destroy it, I think there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn in both good and bad situations. Mm-hmm. You know, as long as you're always learning and you're taking opportunities to see how maybe you would do something different or whatever. Like for me, anything and everything's a learning opportunity. I take so many examples from my bosses, but I almost learned more from the bosses that were terrible bosses on how I wouldn't do that than from the good bosses, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it just sticks with you and you have to like learn to uncouple yourself from it and process it differently because it maybe harmed you. And so I think the negative experiences, as long as we process them, as long as we work through them, they can become such incredible learning opportunities.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to hear your thoughts on the 4-day work week.
Yeah. So I like the idea, but I feel like I would be hypocritical because I'm one of those that's just like, I just can't turn it off. Like Crosschq implemented a 4-day work week. I'd still be working 5 or 6 days a week myself. Again, it's one of those things where people are going to watch what their managers do. If I say, hey, everyone, it's 4-day work week now, and they see me still working every day of the traditional work week, they're probably still just going to work the usual 5-day work week, right? Mm-hmm. So like I do rely a lot on things like scheduled messages. And I also set the expectation for my people. If I accidentally hit send on a Slack at 12 o'clock at night, because I do great work at night.
Yeah.
Like the kid is down, there's no other distractions. I get great work done. But I set the expectation with my team. If you get one of these in the middle of the night, don't worry. If it's outside of regular work hours for you, don't even worry about it whatsoever. There's no expectation, nights, weekends. But I read a stat, actually posted on LinkedIn this morning, 26% of Generation Z or whatever those are called, have their best work hours between 6 p.m. and 3 a.m. And it's like, if that's your best work hours, great, go for it. Like, I don't care if you wake up late then. I don't care if you're going to brunch with your mom in the middle of the day. I don't care if you're going to the gym and working out in the middle of the day. As long as you are getting your work done, it's high quality work and it's not disruptive to the team.
Yeah.
Great, go for it.
Yeah. I think it's huge for people to have the space to identify that. Like, when is the best time for you to be productive? Because we just think about time. For me personally, I had to completely redefine the way that I was looking at time and productivity together, and had to just say, no, like, time is not real. Time is not real in this instance. My body and my brain is going to dictate when I am most productive. There are literal systems in my body that manage the inputs and outputs of that. And for some people, it's late at night or early in the morning. And I think it's so important that we give people a space to identify those things.
With my team, I have basically it's like an entry survey or welcome survey. And I ask them a bunch of questions as soon as they come on board. Or when I join a new organization, I have everyone take it. One of my questions is, what time of day do your best work? And I make sure I'm not scheduling my one-on-one time or meetings during those times.
That's so huge. I'm so happy to hear you do that. I love having those set of questions that help you learn about each other. This boss changed my life, and she asked me, what do you want when you do something really amazing and I want to recognize you? How do you want me to recognize you?
That's a great one.
Yeah, I was shocked. Nobody's ever asked me that before. She was like, some people want to go spend a day on the golf course with me or go out to lunch or have a gift card. And she gave me all these examples. And it was such an incredible learning moment for me and experience for me as well, because it just made me feel really valued and that she cared about me and the whole team. Everyone's different. Everyone is going to receive differently.
Right, exactly. Adding that to my welcome entry survey. Say it one more time for the listeners, but really me.
Yeah. So she asked, when you achieve something great that should be recognized, how or what do you want to be recognized by? So it could be an item, it could be a message, it could be lots of different things. But yeah, like giving them that choice where it's, and again, it's that autonomy, right? Like you decide, you're grown up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it goes back to, I mean, everyone knows this book, like the love languages, right? There's different ways that we express our gratitude and our love, and there's also different ways that we receive it. So I love that as a question that you can apply as a manager in work settings.
Yes, I totally believe in love languages at work and in other relationships that are not intimate.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed is that we always think about how we want to receive. And here's my love languages. But we usually then try to give based on the way we want to receive. I've had this conversation with my partner where it's like, I like gifts. That's one of my love languages. And so sometimes I do that for him and I give him gifts expecting this like huge reaction. And he doesn't, that's not his love language. And I have to remind myself, wait, Anna, that's how you want to receive. That's not how Jason wants to receive.
That was a big unlock for me in my personal relationship with my wife too, or long before we got married, but yes.
Yeah. Okay, before we wrap up, you had mentioned something earlier that I want to circle back to. You had mentioned culture, and I would love to hear how you go about building culture of authenticity, where there's psychological safety, where you're valuing diverse perspectives. What is your approach to getting there?
The foundation is psychological safety, right? This idea that is shared among your team that it's safe to take these interpersonal risks. You can make mistakes, you can ask questions, you can offer ideas, and you won't be embarrassed, ridiculed, punished, et cetera, et cetera. And so it really all evolves around creating that psychological safety. But we've all had the experience before where we're in a meeting and we have something valuable to say and we're like, should I say? And then they don't, right? And that's just one of those signs of psychological safety. But it's really understandable why, right? Like you don't want to look ignorant, you don't want to look incompetent, you don't want to look intrusive or negative. So you don't say anything. You don't ask questions. You don't admit weaknesses. You don't offer your ideas. You don't critique others. And I think that's just like, it's the safe thing to do, but it's also, I think, very detrimental to just the overall culture. So a lot of things that I like to do is like higher level strategic things that I'm always doing, but there's also very tactical things too. Like I'm always saying, is that right? Like, I'm not saying, hey team, this is what you have to do. It's like, I think that's right. So people can, like, it's just a subtle little thing where someone can speak up and say, I don't know, Brandon. And it's like, oh, okay, tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of opens up more of a discussion. Whenever someone comes to me with something that I clearly see they're uncomfortable bringing up to me, I first say, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. And then I let them know. Well, I mean, depending on the situation, it's like, just remember, whatever you say here is between you and me. And that's always going to be the case, except if it would harm them or harm someone else if I didn't bring it to HR or whatever, right? Or it is a violation. But for the most part, it, like, whatever they say does stay with me. And then if it is something like, hey, I was chatting with Jane and Jane's really bugging me and I can't believe Jane did this, and they're just venting. Like, of course, I'm going to hear them out. I'm not going to go to Jane and say, hey, guess what Hannah said? I'm going to empower you to have that conversation with the other person. And that could mean, okay, let's role play, or let me give you some tools, let me give you some language. But I'm going to make sure that you feel comfortable having that conversation. And then I'm going to follow up. I'm going to hold you accountable to that. If you say you're going to have that conversation next week or next whenever, and I try to keep that as soon as possible, don't let too much time in between, I'm going to hold you accountable to that. And I think that's another piece, kind of stepping back, of good leadership, is actually holding people accountable. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't like to do or feel uncomfortable doing, or might not even know how to do it. You know, I was talking with one of the leaders at a previous company I was at, and he told me, yeah, they're just not hitting their goals. I don't want to tell them they're doing a terrible job. It's like, you don't have to. I was just in a situation where I said, hey, you didn't do this. Is there a reason why you didn't do this in front of the team? Of course, don't do it in front of the team every time, but it was the third time. So now I had to bring it up in front of the team. That's a lot different than saying, Hannah, this is the third time I've had to tell you, why aren't you doing this?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, this goes back to language again, right? It's just like how you say what you say makes a big difference too.
Yeah.
But also with my team, I'm always recognizing the times where, like, this could be a very sensitive situation. Let's make sure we are approaching it properly. And then the other managers on my team, you know, when I'm managing managers, I try to give them situations to try to think through. You know, someone on your team is struggling to hit their OKRs, but they never ask for help. That's kind of a problem that is pretty persistent. You know that it's a competent person, but you can't figure out why they haven't come to you. Okay, let's think this through. What can we do to encourage that person? Or someone in your team meeting openly disagrees with you. And that's a very crucial decision on how what you say next matters a lot if that situation comes up, because we've all been there. Everyone's sitting in awkward silence. What do you say next? Like, I get my team to think through these types of things.
That's so great. You're helping prepare them. It goes back to what you said, confidence, competence, and autonomy.
Yep.
Then you're really building that as the foundation for not only you, your team, and every individual. Like, you're doing that zooming in and zooming out, which is also really hard to do.
That's so true. Yeah. I do think that is another trait of a good leader, is being able to, zoom in, zoom out, context switch, that sort of thing. But yeah, a lot of it also just goes back to establishing and enforcing norms, and also building a culture of like a constructive feedback too. I mean, I think that is all part of psychological safety.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And giving the space to, which you mentioned earlier, receive feedback as well as give feedback, which is, I think, super critical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've done trainings in my marketing team. I have a piece of every meeting where it's called the knowledge check, Crosschq, knowledge check. And one of my big personal values is like learning and knowledge. And the first one that I did for the team was on how to give and receive feedback.
What was the key takeaway?
One of the key takeaways where I think a lot of people maybe don't do right. Don't point the finger and say, Hannah, you did this wrong. It's, Hannah, here's what happened and here's how I experienced it. And then you have to really be open to hearing that. So yeah, there's two parts. How do you give feedback and how do you receive feedback? But it's not directly pointing the finger at someone and saying, this is what you did and this is why I am so unhappy. It's, here's what happened, here was the situation, and here's how I experienced it. And I think that's just a good kind of mindset way to frame it that doesn't get someone defensive right away. And it's also easier for you to deliver that feedback too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're not pointing the finger and being like, you were an asshole.
Exactly.
I talk about those types of frameworks a lot because you can use them in so many different situations, but especially conflict management or misunderstandings where it's that you can do that nonviolent communication and it's really powerful.
Yes, I love that nonviolent communication.
All right. Well, I could talk all day about this with you, but we are at time and I want to respect your calendar. I want to ask one last question for our listeners. What experiences or exercises would you recommend for the emerging executives out there where they can enhance their professional growth or personal growth?
I do think probably one of the most powerful things someone can do is it kind of goes back to surrounding yourself with the right people, but go specifically seek out like a thought partner or, someone who you can be honest with. They can be honest with you, give you that feedback and really just help you identify those blind spots so that you can work on those. And again, in the spirit of feedback and learning and growth, I do think that is honestly one of those things that's probably been the most impactful in my career. And I think it's totally fine if someone is that person for you for a year and that's it, and they move on. It doesn't have to be an ongoing forever thing. So yeah, just surround yourself with great people, but I do encourage people to just go seek out one specific person. Maybe it's more of a mentor-mentee relationship, which I'm also a big believer in. But also I think for a mentor, sometimes it doesn't even have to be someone that you meet with all the time. I mean, this kind of goes against what we're just saying, but everyone wants a mentor. But the way I think of it is anyone can be your mentor. If you're a big fan of, I don't know, John Miller or whatever, he's written so much out there. He's got so many talks out there. Why don't you just go listen to all his talks, read all his books and blogs and stuff like that? He doesn't have to be someone you meet with all the time or even personally know. Yeah.
That's a really good point, is that mentorship without direct mentorship. Yeah, I have lots of mentors, Gary Vee, Barack Obama.
Exactly. They can be your mentor and you might not have ever talked to them before. They don't even know you exist. They can be your mentor still.
I mean, that's just like a confidence builder, I feel like, too.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Great advice. All right, Brandon. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing stories, sharing your wisdom. I know our listeners are going to be super amped to hear this. And I appreciate you sharing your time with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I hope someone found at least one thing that they can implement to help them become a better leader today.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you walk away with something empowering that you can take into your own leadership journey. Are you a high-performing executive looking to take your career to the next level? Or maybe you're an emerging leader who wants to develop the skills you need to advance in your role and show up authentically. Or maybe you're experiencing burnout and struggling to find a better work-life balance. Whatever your situation is, one-on-one coaching can help you achieve your personal and professional goals. If you're interested in experiencing the power of coaching for yourself, head on over to hypehousecoaching.com/start coaching now, where you can set up a one-on-one leadership and executive coaching intro session for free. Remember, the only hype that really matters is the hype within.